Okay, so this is extremely bad. Trump just spent 2 days in China, 2 full days. And before you ask me, I honestly don't care how he landed, what red carpet got rolled out, or who clapped when he walked in. I care about one thing, what came out of it. And what came out of it was a disaster. Let me show you why. So before we get into the actual meetings, you need to know who Trump brought with him, because the delegation alone tells you how serious this trip was supposed to be. The biggest surprise on Air Force One was Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA. CNBC actually reported that Jensen wasn't invited, probably just assuming it, and Trump got hella mad about it on Truth Social. He wrote a whole paragraph calling them out and said, Jensen is currently on Air Force One, period. He called the CNBC report fake news and said it's an honor to have him along for the ride. Trump also mentioned a long list of other CEOs, which I'll talk about in a second. He even called Tim Cook the Tim Apple instead of referring to him by his actual name and company. People on X and other socials heavily trolled him for that. Anyways, you can't really blame CNBC for reporting that Jensen wasn't going to China, because Jensen Huang was born in Tainan, Taiwan. He's a Taiwanese born American, and Taiwan is the one country China refuses to even acknowledge as independent and have a long history with. Bringing a Taiwan-born CEO into Beijing, that's a diplomatic minefield, and Trump was ready for it, but guess that didn't work out that well. I will also talk about this in a bit. So coming back to the long list of CEOs published by the White House and Trump himself on Truth Social, the list of people Trump brought to China is genuinely insane. Elon Musk, founder of Tesla and SpaceX, Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock, the biggest asset manager on the planet, then David Solomon from Goldman Sachs, Kelly Ortberg from Boeing. They also did a deal with Boeing, and let's just say it wasn't that great because stock plummeted big after that. I'll talk about that in a bit. The rest of the names you can read on the post itself. Add all these companies together, and you're looking at roughly $20 trillion in market cap. 20 trillion. Holy hell. And look at the industries instead of just focusing on the names Trump brought. Finance, big tech, semiconductors, aerospace, agriculture, biotech, payments. He basically brought the entire backbone of the American economy with him. That is not a casual trip. That is a delegation built to lock in massive deals. But we'll see how that went. Now, if you read the news leading up to this, every outlet was running the same headlines. Iran and the war, U.S. arms sales to Taiwan, Al Jazeera, Associated Press, all of them. But here's the thing. Those were not the real reasons Trump flew to Beijing. Not even close. The real reason was rare earth minerals. I bet you didn't see that being pushed by most news outlets. And guess who controls around 70% of the world's critical rare earth minerals? You guessed it right, China. And it's actually even worse for America than that. China also handles around 90% of global heavy rare earth processing. Mining these minerals is one thing, but the refining, separation, and magnet production, that's all China. Yes, the US has tried to find alternatives, but the problem is that it's expensive and extremely slow. Building a new rare earth supply chain from scratch takes years and tens of billions of dollars. You need mines, processing plants, refineries, magnet factories, the whole stack. China has spent decades building this infrastructure. I also remember a quote from Mao Zedong. He once said, "The Middle East has oil, China has rare earth minerals," so you can already guess how serious this really is. So what even are rare earth minerals? Why does anyone care? Rare earths are the hidden ingredient inside almost everything that powers modern America: electric vehicles, wind turbines, smartphones, data centers, missiles, radar systems, and fighter jets. Tiny amounts of elements like dysprosium and terbium are essential for F-35 fighter jets, Virginia-class submarines, electric vehicles. Without rare earths, you don't have a defense industry, you don't have an AI build-out, and you don't have a clean energy transition. Now here's the part people miss. Some folks think China would never actually weaponize this. They'd never use rare earths as geopolitical leverage. Wrong. Completely wrong. China has already done it. Back in 2010, they cut off rare earth exports to Japan over a fishing boat dispute, and more recently, when Trump came in hot with tariffs in 2025, China hit back by slapping export controls on certain rare earth minerals. Not all of them, just enough to send a message. And that message landed really hard. Ford CEO Jim Farley went on Bloomberg TV and said it straight up. The rare earth shortage forced them to temporarily shut down a plant. The CEO of Ford on national TV saying we can't build cars because we don't have the materials. And Ford wasn't alone. Automakers across the board started warning about production cuts. Defense contractors started auditing their inventory. Tech companies started panicking about the magnets that go into hard drives and motors. It was a full supply chain shock running through the entire US economy. And what did Trump do? He cooled it on the tariffs. He had to, because the alternative was watching American factories go dark. By October 2025, they reached a deal. China agreed to suspend the rare earth export controls, and that suspension expires November 10th, 2026. November 10th, 2026. That deadline is less than 6 months away. And if a new agreement isn't reached, China's stricter controls on gallium, germanium, antimony, and other rare earths automatically resume. That, right there, is the real reason Trump flew to Beijing with $20 trillion of CEOs in tow. And here's the disaster I was talking about. 2 days of meetings, $20 trillion worth of CEOs in the room. The single most important supply chain issue facing the United States. And what came out? Nothing. Not a deal. Not an extension in holy hell. Not even a press statement saying, we're working toward extending the agreement. Total silence on rare earths from both sides. Which means, unless something dramatic happens in the next 6 months, that suspension expires and China's grip tightens again, right as the US heads into midterm elections. And the rare earths weren't the only disaster from this trip. Remember Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA? In an interview right after the trip, Trump openly admitted China is not buying NVIDIA's H200 chips, despite US approval to sell them. NVIDIA stock dropped almost 5% on that news alone. One sentence from Trump and roughly $100 billion in market cap evaporated. And here's the worst part. China isn't refusing to buy because of politics. They're refusing because they don't need to anymore. Look at this chart from Morgan Stanley. China's AI chip self-sufficiency ratio is now sitting at a record 41%. 5 years ago, it was around 10%. It has quadrupled. And Morgan Stanley projects it more than doubles again to roughly 85% by 2030. In plain English, within 5 years, China could meet almost all of its own AI chip demand domestically. Why are they doing this? Because they don't want uncertainty in their supply chain like how America have in rare earth minerals. And the NVIDIA hit doesn't stop at one bad day of trading. China represents roughly 13% of NVIDIA's revenue. Imagine a company worth several $trillion suddenly losing 13% of its revenue. You can do the numbers. And it's bad for America as well. NVIDIA carries an 8% weight in the S&P 500. The number one weighting in the entire index, higher than Apple, higher than Microsoft, higher than Amazon. If you take the companies ranked 10 through 15 in the S&P 500, Walmart to JP Morgan, and add all 5 of them together, they still weigh less than NVIDIA alone. So a hit on NVIDIA is a direct hit on the entire US stock market, and Trump cannot afford a stock market wobble heading into midterm elections. He just can't. Quick break. If you've been following us, you already know we've been ahead of this story. We covered the Intel move on Telegram before it broke. We told you about Trump's connection to a rare earth mineral company when literally no one else was talking about rare earths. If you want this kind of intel before the news cycle catches up, the Telegram link is in the description. It's free. Just join. You'll thank yourself in a week. Now back to the breakdown. Let's talk about the announcements that actually came out of this trip, because there were a few. The problem is, none of them really hit the way Trump wanted. So China had agreed to buy more US agricultural products, beef and soybeans. Yes, $20 trillion worth of CEOs, and we ended up with a deal about soybeans. The administration is talking about double-digit billions in agricultural purchases over the next 3 years. I mean, it sounds huge on paper until you actually look at the numbers. China is currently on track to buy 13.2 million tons of US soybeans this year. That's well below the 27.5 to 33 million tons they used to buy in previous years. Less than half of what they were buying before the trade war even started. So you can call it whatever you want. Next is Boeing. Trump announced that China is buying 200 Boeing jets. Sounds good, until it doesn't. The market was expecting a 500 jet deal. China ordered less than half of what the market expected. Boeing stock dropped almost 4% on the news, marking its steepest single-day fall in 6 months. So the wins were not really wins. They were watered-down versions of what the market had already priced in. 2 days, $20 trillion worth of CEOs. The most important geopolitical meeting of the year. And the United States walked away with a soybean order that's half of what it used to be, a Boeing deal that's half of what was expected, no rare earth agreement, no chip deal, and an Nvidia stock that just bled 5% in a single session. The Los Angeles Times asked the question everyone is quietly thinking. Was Trump outplayed in Beijing? And the market is already telling us the answer. If you want the full breakdown of what's coming next, the November 10th deadline, the rare earth dependencies, and what this actually means for your portfolio, hit subscribe. We're tracking every move. See you in the next one.